So, Okami is getting a sequel, and in the comments of that announcement trailer are some of the most genuine heartfelt praise for a video game that I had ever seen in recent memory. People telling stories of how they were children when Okami came out, and are now full adults, and feeling an injection of childlike happiness for the first time in a while. Some people said that before the title card even hit the trailer, that they had broken down crying at just the possibility that this trailer is for a sequel. Okami had never interested me, but seeing these comments made me curious for what I was missing out on, so I picked up the HT edition and I was met with a refreshingly joyful experience. I understand now why these people are so emotional about a sequel, because this game has a way of becoming part of your psyche. Funny enough, after booting up the game, I still didn't really find the appeal. The game struggles with a good first impression, primarily in its unbelievably slow intro cutscene, and camera controls that will be a consistent means of frustration all the way up to the final moments of the game. I also had an unbelievably hard time trying to get the game to work with my controller, but I think that was a Steam problem, not so much the game, so no points deducted, but I think it is worth mentioning. The game takes an interesting narrative approach to its introduction. The intro cutscene tells a story of the destruction of an ancient evil named Orochi at the hands of a white wolf named Shiranua, and valiant swordsman named Nagi. Throughout this intro story, I kept thinking this would be a fun game to play and not read, but oh well, and thankfully this is addressed about 2/3 through the game. Orochi is sealed away with a powerful sword named Tsukiyomi, and everyone lived happily ever after, until our first legitimate cutscene shows a cowardly man in search of power unleash Orochi once more onto the land. This first real cutscene displays the artistic and cinematic presentation that this game is known for. More or less, everything in this game is drawn, or appears to be drawn with paint. Okami's art style is hands down the primary selling point of this game, and everything from the music, the combat, the sound effects, and the character designs all work together to create an unbelievably beautiful game that looks great even in today's landscape. At least until combat starts. Then all the colors and shapes and actions turn into a visual soup and I can barely tell what is even happening. The best compliment I can give this game's presentation is that it's in the same league as Red Alert 2 or Persona 5. And the best compliment that you can give me is to hit those like and subscribe buttons. At about the 13-minute mark into this cutscene, we finally meet our protagonist, Okami Amaterasu. Birthed from the statue of Shiranua by a forest sprite named Sakuya, to defend the land against Orochi's second coming. Honestly, an excellent narrative introduction. I just wish it wasn't told through us through slow text boxes that you can't skip or speed up. But that's the last truly negative thing about this game is, oh my lord, some of these exposition sequences are miserably slow. Despite how interesting they are, just because the text scrolling speed is at a snail's pace. Even crazier is that some of them are able to be sped up. It just seems like anytime a scene has any sort of camera work or character actions, you are forced to stick to the pace of the scene whether you like it or not. So we finally gain control of Amaterasu and are set loose on this beautiful starry landscape for our tutorial. Here we are given our broad strokes of what the story of this game is going to be. Our mission is to scour the land in search of our 13 missing god powers to destroy Orochi and save the world. Our powers are unique too. Basically our tail is a paintbrush, and each power is associated with a specific brush stroke or shape. This is our primary method of interacting with the world. It's pretty much a Metroidvania meets Legend of Zelda. You find a problem, learn about a new brushstroke that solves that problem, and unlocks new sections of the world, and rinse and repeat. There's some light platforming, nothing too crazy until later in the game when they're trying to pad out the runtime a little bit. Once you finish the tutorial, the game slowly starts to open up, and I'm surprised about the scale of the content of this game. I genuinely thought this was like a 10-hour romp to gain your powers and kill Orochi. But instead, even without engaging much with the side content, I still managed to chew up about 35 hours. I would throw another 10 hours on top of that if you're doing side content or completionist stuff. There was more than once where I thought, surely I must be about to beat the game. And the story just keeps throwing more and more ancient evils at you to defeat. This isn't a bad thing, for sure, just unexpected. So our first primary task in the process to beat Orochi is to gather 8 great canine warrior spirits. And this serves as the game's way to show you all that it has to offer as you scour the beautifully painted Japanese countryside and gather new powers, do some fishing mini-games, and fight many, many enemies. Throughout this adventure, you're meeting all kinds of NPCs with some absolutely bonkers personalities. I bring this up because, to be completely honest with you, I thought this game was going to be far more mature than it is, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. All the promotional art and media I've seen of this game throughout my life has led me to believe that this was a quiet, artsy-fartsy experimental game with deep themes. And on a surface level, that's true. Then it hits you with a breakdancing village elder with an orange on his head, whose name is Mr. Orange. This game is far more wacky than I anticipated, and interacting with the NPCs is almost always a blast. There's a recurring character named Susanoo, who is a descendant of the great warrior from the intro scene, so you'd think he'd be a competent fighter. But no, the gimmick is when he's in a fight, you're using your paintbrush to help him slay whatever he's fighting, which is funny on the surface, but his character arc is quite a ride as you realize his whole story isn't about being a warrior. It's more about standing up for what is right and to be brave enough to defend the ones you love despite the odds or the harm that will be done to you. So yes, this game has some very deep themes and is totally artsy-fartsy, but for every scene where characters are going through emotional tribulation and going through complicated story beats, there's a scene where Amaterasu walks out onto thin air and falls on her butt like a cartoon character. Anyways, after we gather all 8 spirits and combine them into this berry-looking thing, we can finally break the barrier that Orochi is hiding behind. And I would not blame you for thinking that this is near the end of the game, because the stakes are sky high and the atmosphere has an unbelievable air of dread as you approach the boss encounter. The only thing hinting that this isn't the end of the game is that we don't have all the powers and maybe only a quarter of the map is discovered. So, basically every 100 years, Orochi claims a maiden to sacrifice in his name. If the villagers don't follow through with the sacrifice, then, Orochi goes on a killing spree throughout the land or something? And this time, Orochi has chosen the secret crush of Susanoo, named Kushi. So it's time for us to team up and take Orochi down and effectively end the tutorial. Yeah, that's right, the ancient evil who's tearing the land apart and threatening to kill everything, with some of the best music and atmosphere and cinematics and story arcs, is genuinely the tutorial boss. Well, at least in my opinion, because after taking him down and shedding tears of joy for my boy Susanoo, the game really feels to open up as our objective changes. After we defeat Orochi, a black evil mist exits his body, and now it's our job to figure out what this entity was and put them to the sword. I'm not going to recount the events of the story in so much detail as I like to do in these exploration retrospective videos, because to be genuinely honest, it's the same story told 3 times in this game. An ancient evil causes trouble for a location in Japan, so you go there and solve everyone's problems until you gain the powers to reach the boss arena and save the day. Of course, in the meantime, you grow stronger, gain new weapons, and cleanse the land of the evil curse that turns people to stone and eats your god powers. There's a few notable questlines, like one where you shrink down and get to see what your buddy Isun actually looks like. Then go inside a king's body to cleanse him of a curse that has plagued his city in an evil malaise. You help an alien return to the stars in a spaceship, leaving me literally speechless as I bask in pure creative fun the developers were trying to show me and allow me to play. Speaking of fun, the combat. I can't believe I haven't mentioned it until now. Amaterasu has many evils to face, and she has many weapons in which to face them with. Reflectors, swords, and rosaries. Each one of these has 2 modes. For example, the reflector is a smacking tool when placed in the primary slot, or a shield when placed in the secondary slot. You have every power available to you during combat, and although it definitely starts slow, by the mid-game, you'll be dealing with enemies who have to be fought in specific ways, sometimes pretty creatively. It gets super messy when there's a lot of enemies on screen, so you'll get hit often, but it's not like the enemies hit too hard. I didn't die a single time except at the very end on the last boss fight, when I thought that's what you had to do. Yes, I was very upset about that, so throw a like and subscribe my way to make me feel better. I'm gonna go on a weird tangent here, but one thing I didn't expect is how much the creators of this game loves girls. The creators definitely got a bit carried away with how sexualized they tried to make the girls. Like, check this scene out where a sea serpent is sneaking up on us, and yeah. But besides that, the creators put a lot of respect on the women of Japan, making them leaders of nations, as with the sea folk, powerful priestesses like with Reo. And honestly, the main character Amaterasu is treated with a lot of respect. Same with Sakuya, the character that resurrects you at the beginning of the game. It's hard to explain, but there's an air of reverence anytime you interact with any of the female characters, and despite a few instances, even the men don't get punched down on in any serious way. Maybe what I'm trying to get at is this game really respects you as a player, but also really shows honor to itself, even though it can be lighthearted on the surface. It's a feeling I often get when playing this game, and the best way to truly explain it to you is what happens when you find wild animals as you progress throughout the game. You can find tigers or bears, rabbits and birds, all just hanging out and having a good time, and they're not hostile to you or anything like that. You genuinely don't have to acknowledge them in any way, shape, or form, but if you take the time and slow down and feed them, then you're treated to a scene like this. There's no real reason to do this. The game gives you a little bit of experience points, but other than that, you don't have much reason to feed the animals. Yet, I bet you 90% of the people who've played this game fed every animal they came across, because the game makes you feel like what you just did truly mattered, and the fanfare of the scenery changing to this beautiful area as Amaterasu just silently watches over them has such an unbelievable amount of storytelling in a quick, wordless moment. The game has tons of moments like this where it seems like the developers are giving you a nod of respect. I want to mention one quick criticism here. About midway through the final act of the game, it's pretty obvious the devs were under a heavy time crunch or something, because the story just starts going in 1,000 directions, and a lot of it gets told to you in static cutscenes with text boxes that just seem to crawl on for eternity. There's also a very blatant boss rush that I'm certain was thrown in just to squeeze another 30 minutes out of you that just could have been skipped entirely. The game is very long as it is for the genre it's in, so I don't know what the point of this was. There's also some absolutely bonkers plot points that include time travel and space aliens that makes the last portion of this game a little bit of a narrative whirlwind. One last thing I want to reiterate is that Okami's camera sucks, dude. It will constantly fight you all throughout the game, including the combat. And since the game has a painted aesthetic, the depth perception is absolutely miserable. Tie the depth perception and camera problems together and you really have a hard time with some of the platforming and even combat when it gets too hectic. If anyone in the new studio is listening to this and made it this far, first off, hit that like and subscribe for me. But second of all, please address this in the sequel. Yet overall, I'm extremely pleased with everything this game has to offer, and I understand why everyone is so hyped for the coming sequel, because this game was really the full package, especially for the early 2000s when this game came out. There is an exhausting amount of content to enjoy, an absolutely timeless art style, and a tone that balances on silly game you play after work and emotional train wreck comfort game. I can't believe it took me this long to play the thing, but thanks to the announcement of the sequel and the comments on that video, I got to enjoy a legitimate masterpiece of a game. Thank you for watching. Hit like and subscribe. Ropeburn out.